Have you ever gotten a taste at exactly 11:43 p.m. from someone who quite disappeared from you for an entire week? Even though your logical brain is like, nope, not this again. Your heart still flutters just a little bit because some part of you is like, maybe this time it's different. That right there is breadcrumbing. So now, breadcrumbing isn't someone being nice, and it's definitely not them just being forgetful or busy. It's actually one of the most quietly toxic texting patterns we don't talk about enough because it doesn't look like manipulation. It definitely looks like late night check-ins. So it looks like reacting to your story, like that occasional miss you text that's usually followed by silence. There is a Reddit user who shared an analogy, and I quote, "Imagine a dog gets a wonderful bowl of food on a pouch and it eats its tummy full. The next day, the dog comes back and there's another bowl of delicious food waiting for it. So the next day, it comes back, nothing. It thinks, maybe it's just an off day, then leaves hungry. Dog comes back the next day. There is a small itty bitty piece of food. The dog gobbles it up and is not satisfied. It knows full well it's not enough, but is too hungry to leave it. It hopes tomorrow will be better. And here is the thing. Breadcrumbing doesn't just happen in dating. It shows up in friendship, in old world connections, and even within families. It's when someone gives you enough to get you emotionally attached, but not enough to actually move you forward. In this video, we are going to break down what exactly breadcrumbing is, why it messes with your mind, and how you can finally stop giving your energy to people who don't fully show up. So let's get into it. So let's talk about what breadcrumbing actually is. It's one of those things that many of us have felt before but didn't have the right word for it. So breadcrumbing is when someone gives you just enough attention, just enough affection or engagement to get you emotionally invested, but never enough to build something real. And the tricky part, it doesn't always look toxic. It looks like one of those messages like, "Are you up?" messages that you receive late at night. So it looks like an occasional miss you text or reacting to your Instagram story with a heart emoji, even though they haven't asked how you're doing in weeks. It's a confusing mix of hope and inconsistency. And it's not just romantic. It shows up in friendship, in situationships, almost relationships where you're not sure you're close or just convenient. Let me read you this one post I found on Reddit. He used to text me every 3 or 4 days with something random, like, "Just saw your fave show is back." But when I try to continue the convo, he will ghost again. For months, I held on to those little crumbs like they meant something. And that's exactly how breadcrumbing works. So this time, it creates a circle where you do all the emotional heavy lifting, just waiting for the next tiny interaction. So on Quora, I came a response by @Camila Psych. She's a therapist and she said this: breadcrumbing isn't about love or connection. It's about control, and the breadcrumber gets to feel wanted and relevant without having to actually show up for the relationship. And this therapist was trying to answer to a question on Quora: why do people breadcrumb others? And it's kind of wild when you think about how normalized this word or phenomenon or subject matter has become. And then I found on TikTok a user. So the user shared this, and I quote, "I realized I was breadcrumbing a guy. I liked the attention. I liked knowing someone cared, but I didn't want anything serious. And I thought I was being nice. I wasn't. I was just being emotionally selfish." And the point actually isn't to shame anybody. The truth is, we've all done a little breadcrumbing at one point or the other, ourselves, to our friends, or just anyone around us. Or maybe without even realizing it. Maybe you just sent a just checking in message to someone, not because you want to reconnect, but because we're lonely or curious or just needs a little validation. So the problem really is when that becomes a pattern, a habit of giving people half presence, but keeping them fully emotionally invested. So now that we know what breadcrumbing is, why do you fall for it? Because on the surface, it looks so obvious. If someone is not showing up for us fully, we should walk away. But the reality is, it's not that easy. There's actually a specific psychological reason why breadcrumbing works so well and why it hurts so much. So it all comes down to something called intermittent reward. This is a concept from behavioral psychology. Basically, we are more likely to repeat a behavior when the rewards are unpredictable. And this is the same thing that makes gambling addictive. You don't win every time, but when you do, it feels amazing. Breadcrumbing works exactly the same way. You never know when they will respond. You never know what they'll say. But when they finally show up in your notifications, your brain lights up with a hint of dopamine. So let me read what a Reddit user wrote on Reddit. This user says, I know I should block him, but the rush I get when he messages, even after days of silence, is embarrassing. Like I feel relieved, even though I was angry before. So I want you to know that that's not a weakness, but it's biology. Your brain is simply responding to unpredictable rewards, not real connection. And if you've ever felt like breadcrumbing hits, especially hard, you're not alone in this. And it's even worse if you've got an anxious attachment style. Psychologists say anxious types often crave closeness and certainty. So when someone pulls away and then reappears, it creates this kind of emotional whiplash. And another user on Quora described this term, this breadcrumbing, as it's like your nervous system is constantly waiting for the next ping. You're not just a person, you're addicted to the relief you feel when they finally show up. And this user was responding to a question on Quora, why do I fall for people who breadcrumb me? And there's also a brilliant write-up in Psychology Today titled Breadcrumbing and Why It Hurts So Much. In this piece, the writer explains that breadcrumbing hurts so much because of what it represents. It feeds our longing for connection while simultaneously confirming our deepest fear that we are not enough to be chosen fully, which is very painful. So that one sentence, honestly, it stopped me because breadcrumbing is really confusing. It forces you to fill in the blanks and it turns silence into a puzzle. And most times, truly, it makes you overanalyze your own worth. And when we do not have clarity, we create stories in our own heads. We justify, chase. And recently, I saw a video on TikTok. And let me read what the user says. So this user said, I used to overthink every message he didn't send. Like, I'll sit there writing drafts I never sent, wondering what I did wrong. Turns out he was breadcrumbing 4 different girls. He didn't forget me. He just kept me on standby. And listen, if that's ever been you, I want you to hear this. It's not your fault. You're not overreacting. You're not too much. You were just in a circle designed to keep you confused. So we've talked about what breadcrumbing is and why we are wired to fall for it. But here is where it really starts to hit. How breadcrumbing affects our mental health. And I don't say this lightly because this isn't just about texting. It's about what happens to our brain, our body, when we are constantly chasing mixed signals. And in relation to anxiety and overthinking, I found a Reddit user and I'll read what he says. I didn't realize how much it was affecting me until I started losing sleep over texts. Like I was replaying conversations, wondering if I was too much or not enough. It's mentally exhausting. And this is really common. So breadcrumbing creates a constant emotional loop where you're scanning for signs, interpreting silence, and building stories in your own head. It's a type of chronic overthinking where you continuously check your phone, reading texts, reading them over again, and drafting replies you never sent. And that mental fatigue is real. So let me read what a TikTok creator posted on TikTok. Breadcrumbing slowly chips away at your confidence. You start to internalize the silence. You start to believe that being partially loved is the best you're gonna get. And this makes sense because the longer your breadcrumbs, the harder it becomes to remember what real connection even feels like. You begin to doubt your own needs, your worth, and your ability to trust your gut. So, an article on Cosmopolitan written by Olivia Blair. The article is titled Emotional Gaslighting in Slow Motion, and she wrote, "It's like you're being pulled on a leash. Slowly, consistently, but just enough to stop you from walking away. And after a while, you don't even feel sad. You just feel numb." And this was in Cosmopolitan UK in 2024. So this is practically emotional burnout when your nervous system is constantly activated, scanning for signs, handling letdowns, processing the silence. It shuts down over time and you start to feel emotionally flat, like you're watching your own life from outside. Someone that I read on Quora also described this time as, and this is the part that is hard to admit, but also freeing to realize. So breadcrumbing doesn't just affect how you feel about that person. So it affects how you feel about yourself. And when you cut off the breadcrumbing circle, what you're really doing is to come back to yourself, to your clarity, to your joy, and to your peace. So let's bring it to the ground for a moment, because everything we've talked about so far is not just theory and it's not just psychology speak. It's real. Real people, real confusion, and real emotional fallout. And the thing is, weirdly, when you look around, breadcrumbing is everywhere. I also read a quote on Reddit that hit me so hard. And this Reddit user wrote, "My best friend only ever reaches out when she's lonely. She sends me this 'let's catch up soon' text and then disappears again. I stop replying. I realize I'm not her friend. I'm her comfort blanket." And that's what breadcrumbing does too. It happens within friends, within families, situationship, friendship, and dating. So breadcrumbing is not just romantic. It's everywhere. So it's anyone who gives you a tiny burst of connection with no intention of actually being consistent. I was listening to a podcast where the presenter says that we cling to the crumbs because we were never taught to demand the feast. And so we mistake inconsistency for depth. But it's not depth, it's chaos. And honestly, if breadcrumbing had a thesis statement, that would do it justice. That would be it. Someone on TikTok also described her experience on breadcrumbing, and this is what she has to say. "He liked all my stories, watched every single one, sent a fire emoji here and there, but never replied to my texts. And it felt like interest until I realized it was just digital ego fuel." Right? I think this is something that so many of us resonate with, especially in the digital age, where social media blurs the line between genuine affection and convenient distraction. A relationship therapist doctor who often speaks about narcissists once said, "Breadcrumbing is a manipulation tactic. It's hope weaponized. It keeps you emotionally tied to someone who has no real intention of choosing you." And when I heard this on YouTube, I actually paused the video because it reframes the experience from, "Why am I not enough?" to, "Wait, why am I accepting this?" And sometimes the reflection gets even more real. An Instagram user commented, and I quote, "I realized I was breadcrumbing a guy because I liked the attention. I didn't want to lose him, but I didn't want to be with him either. It was selfish. I had to own that." So we've all been there, sending how you've been, not because we care, but because we are bored or simply because we are scared of being alone. So yes, breadcrumbing is real, and the more we name it, the less power it will have over us. And sometimes that naming begins with the smallest shifts. Noticing when someone's energy feels inconsistent and trusting yourself enough to stop chasing crumbs. So now the question we should ask ourselves is, how do we stop accepting crumbs? So if you find yourself nodding along at any point in this video, the question naturally becomes, what do I do now? And you ask yourself, how do I actually stop falling into the breadcrumb loop? And the first step to this is always awareness. Breadcrumbing can feel like attention, but when you step back and look at it, it's just repetition. It's the same what's obsessed, the same we should hang soon, the same heart emoji or fire emojis that goes nowhere. And a Reddit user said, I realized I was holding on to a thread, not a relationship. Once I reread our chat from the past 6 months, I saw it clearly. Nothing ever moved forward. That was my wake-up call. So sometimes clarity begins by simply reading the receipts. And one of the most powerful shifts is to stop responding to them immediately you receive their texts. Not to punish them and not to play games, but to give yourself a moment to breathe. To check in with your own emotion if you're ready to jump back into a loop. And on Quora, I found a therapist advising that responding slowly isn't cold, it's conscious. So take space before you re-engage this person or with the people who confuse you. And of course, the therapist was responding to a question asked on Quora on how do I set boundaries with inconsistent communicators? So the next step for you is to set a soft boundary. I know this part can be scary, but it is also incredibly freeing. Of course, you don't need to be dramatic. You just need to be simply clear. And here is a phrase you can use. Hey, I noticed our communication seems a bit one-sided. I'm looking for more consistency, so I'm going to take a step back. Take care. And that's it. This doesn't mean that you're starting a fight. You're just choosing to protect your own peace. Step 4 is to rebuild your inner baseline. And this is because breadcrumbing works because we are seeking external reassurance. And part of healing for us is giving ourselves that reassurance. A creator I watched on TikTok said that I started saying this to myself after every almost test. If they wanted to, they would. If they don't, I will. And by I will, I mean I will validate me. And that's it. And that kind of mantra, honestly, can change the way you move around in the world. The next step is to fill the empty space, because the fact is, when you stop accepting breadcrumbs, you are going to feel a little hungry at first, but that is not emptiness. That's space, and space is where real connection grows. And you can fill this space by taking up journaling, take walks, and talk to people who show up fully. And remind yourself that love doesn't have to be in through confusion. This doesn't mean that you're being too much. You're just finally asking for enough. So if you've made it this far in this video, first of all, thank you. That means this hit home in some way. Maybe you saw a pattern, maybe you recognize a dynamic, maybe, just maybe, you realize that what you've been calling hope might actually be breadcrumbing. And that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It means you've been trying to make sense of emotional crumbs in a world that hasn't always taught us to ask for the whole meal. So here is my challenge for you. Take a 72-hour no-text detox from someone who's been breadcrumbing you. Not checking their socials, not replying to them, no reacting to the emoji eyes as they slide to your DMs. Just 3 days. Take 3 days to breathe and to come back to your baseline. And I am rooting for you and hope this works for you. And I want you to know that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking someone who was only ever going to give you too little. And once you know that, really know that, you stop chasing crumbs. And then you start building tables for people who bring real meals and who wants to stay with you and share them with you. So thanks for being on my channel and thanks for watching. See you in my next video.